They say life can change in an instant, and I learned just how true that is on a quiet Thursday morning in May. I remember the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen, the faint hum of a song on the radio as I grabbed my keys, ready to head to a business meeting. I was proud of the life I'd built, my thriving tech company, the dream car I'd bought with my own hard-earned money, and of course, my marriage to Ryan. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. But fate had other plans. The accident was brutal, or so I was told. A truck ran a red light, smashing into the driver's side of my car. The world I knew vanished in the blink of an eye, replaced by darkness. When I woke up, 6 months later, mind you, I found myself in a hospital bed, surrounded by sterile white walls and the faint beeping of monitors. It was surreal, like waking from a bad dream only to realize the nightmare had just begun. During those 6 months, I was in a coma. Life didn't pause for anyone else. Not for Ryan, and certainly not for his mother, Victoria. What I thought was love and loyalty between us turned out to be something far uglier. At first, Ryan played the part of the grieving, devoted husband well. I'd later learn he told the nurses how he couldn't imagine a life without me. But as time dragged on, and the doctors began using words like unlikely recovery, he started seeing my absence as an opportunity rather than a tragedy. Victoria, who never liked me, by the way, was quick to encourage his newfound freedom. "You need to think about your future, Ryan," she probably said with her signature, icy tone. To her, I was just the obstacle standing in the way of her son's happiness. It wasn't long before Ryan acted on her poisonous advice. While I lay unconscious, hooked up to machines, Ryan sold my beloved luxury car. My car. The one I spent years saving up for. The car that symbolized my independence and success. He didn't stop there, though. No, he used the money to fund a tropical getaway to Hawaii with Chloe, his so-called secret girlfriend. I can picture it now, Ryan and Chloe sipping cocktails on a beach, laughing under the golden sun, while I was hooked to a ventilator, clinging to life. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the kind of cold, calculated cruelty I never imagined from the man I loved. But the worst part? Victoria was the mastermind behind it all. She whispered in his ear, urging him to move on, as if I were already gone. To them, my coma was a convenience, not a tragedy. I wasn't Olivia anymore. I was just an asset to liquidate, a memory they hoped would fade. Of course, back then, I didn't know any of this. I was still in the hospital, blissfully unaware of the storm waiting for me at home. But the moment I opened my eyes and began to piece everything together, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to make sure they all paid for what they'd done. When I woke up, the world felt distant, like a blurry image I couldn't quite bring into focus. My body was heavy, each movement a monumental effort, and my voice, once confident and steady, was now a fragile whisper. The nurses told me it was a miracle I had woken up at all, but I wasn't sure it felt like one. I spent weeks in a fog, relearning how to walk, how to eat without trembling hands, how to exist in a body that had been broken and mended without my permission. Ryan visited me exactly 3 times during that period. 3. Each visit was more awkward than the last, as if being around me made his skin crawl. At first, I chalked it up to the trauma of the accident. Maybe seeing me like this, weak, vulnerable, was too much for him. But then I began noticing the cracks. It started with hushed conversations I overheard in the hallways. Nurses whispering about how poor Mrs. Hale deserved better. One day, I caught fragments of a conversation between 2 orderlies. "Can you believe he went on vacation while she was in a coma?" one asked, his voice tinged with disgust. "Yeah, with that blonde. What's her name again?" "Chloe." I froze, the spoonful of bland oatmeal in my hand trembling. Chloe. Who the hell was Chloe? I told myself it had to be a misunderstanding. Ryan wouldn't, he couldn't. But the whispers didn't stop. Over time, they became harder to ignore. Even my physical therapist, Jenna, a sweet woman with kind eyes and an obvious disdain for my husband, made pointed comments about how some people just don't know how to appreciate what they have. The puzzle pieces were coming together, but I wasn't ready to face the picture they were forming. It wasn't until one afternoon, when I asked Ryan about the car, that I felt the full weight of his betrayal. "Where's my car, Ryan?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. He hesitated, his eyes darting to the side before landing back on me. "Oh, I sold it," he said, as if he'd just mentioned taking out the trash. "You sold it?" My heart sank. "Why?" "We needed the money, Olivia." "The hospital bills, liar," I snapped, my voice rising despite the weakness in my throat. "Insurance covered the bills, Ryan." "Where did the money really go?" He didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. That night, after he left the hospital in a rush, I begged Jenna to bring me my phone. It was outdated and covered in dust, but it still worked. What I found sent a cold, numbing wave through my entire body. Photos. Hundreds of photos, plastered all over Ryan's social media, of him and a stunning blonde laughing on beaches, clinking glasses in five-star restaurants, and lounging by the pristine turquoise waters of Hawaii. Chloe. But that wasn't all. As I scrolled deeper, I found messages. Texts between Ryan and his mother, Victoria, about how they thought I wouldn't wake up. About how Ryan should start moving on. About how Chloe is the fresh start you deserve. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there, staring at the screen, letting the betrayal wash over me in waves. The man I loved, the man who had promised to stand by me in sickness and in health, had not only given up on me, but had actively celebrated my absence. But I didn't cry, not for long, anyway. My devastation quickly hardened into something sharper. Resolve. I would finish my rehabilitation. I would get stronger. And then, I would go home, and I would make sure Ryan, Victoria, and Chloe felt the full weight of what they had done. For now, I played along, smiling faintly when Ryan stopped by, pretending not to notice the guilt that flared in his eyes when I asked about the house, or the bank accounts. Let him think I was still the naive, trusting Olivia he married. The truth was, I was no longer the same woman he left behind. That Olivia had died in the crash. The one who woke up was ready for war. I remember the day I finally left the hospital. The nurse wheeled me to the front entrance, the spring air warm against my skin, but my mind was cold and calculating. As Jenna hugged me goodbye, she whispered, "Go get them," and I knew she could see the determination burning in my eyes. Ryan picked me up, of course. He couldn't avoid it without looking suspicious. But the drive home was far from the emotional reunion I once dreamed of. He was jittery, barely meeting my gaze, and filled the silence with empty chatter about how good it was to have me back. His words felt rehearsed, his tone hollow. I just nodded, gripping the armrest as the familiar streets rolled by, knowing I wasn't returning to the same home I had left. When we arrived, the shock was immediate. The house, my sanctuary, was unrecognizable. Gone were the warm, earthy tones and the carefully curated furniture that I had spent years choosing. Instead, the living room was awash in pale pinks and golds, like some gaudy influencer's dream. My favorite paintings, the ones I had collected from small-town artists on my travels, had been replaced by abstract monstrosities I wouldn't hang in a garage sale. It didn't take long to notice that my things, my books, my keepsakes, my life, were missing. "Where are my things, Ryan?" I asked, my voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. He stammered, his hand rubbing the back of his neck. We had to declutter a bit while you were gone. It was hard, you know, thinking you might not what, Ryan? I snapped. Come back. Survive? He flinched, but before he could respond, the door swung open. And there she was. Chloe. She strolled in like she owned the place, her high heels clicking against the floor I had chosen, carrying a bag of groceries like she was coming home to her loving family. For a brief moment, she didn't notice me, too busy tossing a casual, "Hey, babe," in Ryan's direction. But then her gaze landed on me, and the color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Who is this?" she stammered, taking an instinctive step back. Ryan, caught in the crossfire, opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. It was Victoria, who finally emerged from the hallway, her voice sharp and scolding as always. "What's all this noise about?" Her words stopped when she saw me. For the first time, the Ice Queen looked rattled, her normally composed features twisting in disbelief. "Olivia," she breathed, her tone a mix of shock and dread. "You're alive." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Chloe's eyes darted between me and Ryan, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Finally, she found her voice. "Alive? Ryan, what is she talking about?" I thought. She stopped herself, but the damage was done. "Oh, please," I said, my voice dripping with venom. "Don't stop on my account. I'd love to hear what you thought." Ryan stepped forward, trying to place a hand on my shoulder. "Olivia, let me explain." "Don't touch me," I hissed, and he froze in place, his face paling. "You lied to me. You betrayed me. And now you're standing here in my house, pretending this is all normal." Victoria, ever the meddler, tried to step in. "Now, Olivia, you've just been through an ordeal. You should focus on resting instead of jumping to conclusions." "Jumping to conclusions?" I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "I don't need to jump anywhere, Victoria. The evidence is all over this house. And don't think for a second I don't know how much you had to do with this." Chloe, now visibly shaking, clutched her bag of groceries like a lifeline. "Ryan, what is going on? You told me she wasn't what, Chloe?" I interrupted, taking a slow, deliberate step toward her. "Wasn't coming back. Wasn't alive. Surprise." She stumbled backward, her eyes wide with fear. I didn't know. He told me," he said. "I know exactly what he said," I snapped. "And don't worry, you'll both have plenty of time to explain yourselves. To me, to the neighbors, and eventually, to the police." Ryan's face turned ghostly white at the word police. "Olivia, please. Let's just talk about this. We can fix it." I met his desperate gaze with a calm, icy stare. "Oh, don't worry, Ryan. We're going to talk. But not here, and not now. For now, I suggest you pack a bag. This house is no longer your home." Victoria started to protest, but I held up a hand to silence her. "You've done enough, Victoria. This conversation is over." For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Good. As I stood in the wreckage of what had once been my home, I felt a strange sense of calm. This wasn't the ending they had planned for me. No, this was just the beginning. By the time we sat in the living room, the air was thick with tension. I could feel the weight of their stares, Ryan's filled with nervous dread, Chloe's with growing panic, and Victoria's with her usual disdain. But I wasn't afraid. I had spent months preparing for this moment, carefully gathering every piece of evidence that would expose their betrayal. Ryan broke the silence first, his voice unsteady. "Olivia, I know this all looks bad, but you don't understand. Stop, I said sharply, holding up my hand. I don't want to hear your excuses. I want you to listen. I reached into my bag and pulled out the stack of documents I had compiled during my recovery. Bank statements, emails, and text messages, all neatly organized. The room seemed to shrink as I placed them on the coffee table, my movements slow and deliberate. Let's start with this, I said, picking up the first sheet. The sale of my car. You remember, don't you? The one you swore you'd keep safe, because you knew how much it meant to me. I turned the paper round, showing the proof of the transaction. Sold for far less than it was worth, just days after my accident. Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but I silenced him with a glare. And this, I continued, pulling out a series of screenshots. Text messages between you and Chloe, planning your little getaway to Hawaii. It must have been so relaxing, sipping cocktails on the beach while your wife was lying in a hospital bed. Chloe gasped, her face turning red as she glared at Ryan. You said she'd never find out. I didn't think she would. Ryan shot back, his panic bubbling to the surface. Oh, but I did, I said, cutting through their bickering. And it doesn't stop there. I pulled out the final nail in the coffin. Photos of Ryan and Chloe on their vacation. Smiling, holding hands, laughing as if nothing else in the world mattered. You were so careless, Ryan. These pictures were all over social media. Did you really think no one would tell me? Ryan buried his face in his hands, his voice muffled. Olivia, I thought you wouldn't make it. I was grieving. Grieving? I repeated, my voice rising. Is that what you call betrayal? You weren't grieving, Ryan. You were celebrating. Before he could respond, Victoria finally spoke up, her tone cold and cutting. You've made your point, Olivia. But let's not act like this is all Ryan's fault. You're the one who left him in that position. I turned to her, my anger now fully unleashed. Left him in that position. I didn't leave anyone, Victoria. I was in a coma. Fighting for my life while you schemed behind my back. You were selfish, she snapped. Hanging on like that, putting my son through so much pain. He needed closure, and I helped him find it. Closure? I said, my voice shaking with fury. You call this closure? Manipulating your son into betraying his wife, encouraging him to run off with someone else while I was still alive. Victoria stood, her posture rigid. You've always been too stubborn to see things clearly. Ryan needed a fresh start. He couldn't wait forever for you to wake up, if you even would. Her words hung in the air, cruel and deliberate. I felt the sting of them deep in my chest, but I refused to let her see me falter. You're right about one thing, Victoria, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I am stubborn. And that's why I'm still standing here, alive, while your pathetic schemes fall apart around you. Chloe, who had been silent up until now, finally exploded. This is insane. I didn't sign up for this. Ryan, you told me she was practically dead. And now you want me to just sit here and listen to this circus. Then leave, I said coolly, pointing to the door. No one's keeping you here. Her face twisted with anger and humiliation, but she grabbed her bag and stormed out without another word. I turned back to Ryan and Victoria, who now sat frozen in their seats, their arrogance melting into fear. Here's how this is going to go, I said. You're going to pack your things and get out of my house. And you're going to do it quietly, because the next step is the police. Ryan looked up at me, his eyes wide and desperate. Olivia, please. We can work this out. I made mistakes, but I love you. I let out a bitter laugh. You don't know what love is, Ryan. Love doesn't betray. Love doesn't sell someone's life away for a vacation. You don't love me. You love yourself. He slumped back in his chair, defeated. Victoria, however, wasn't ready to give up. You can't just throw us out like this, she said, her voice trembling with indignation. This is Ryan's home too. Not anymore, I said firmly. You made your choices, Victoria. Now you'll live with the consequences. With that, I stood and walked out of the room, leaving them to their silence. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the house, a house that was mine once again. But this wasn't over. Not yet. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands steady as I signed the final document Jenna and my lawyer, Jenna, had prepared. Every stroke of the pen felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Jenna, as always, stood by my side, her presence grounding me. You sure about this, Olivia? She asked softly, though her determined gaze told me she already knew my answer. I've never been more sure of anything, I replied. They need to face the consequences. It didn't take long, after I filed the charges, for the wheels of justice to begin turning. Jenna had been meticulous, ensuring every piece of evidence was airtight. Fraudulent transactions, the sale of my car, Ryan's incriminating texts, and even Victoria's manipulative emails. When the police cars pulled up outside my house that afternoon, I felt a mix of nerves and vindication. The flashing lights drew the attention of my neighbors, who peered from windows and gathered on sidewalks, their murmurs a low hum of curiosity and speculation. Inside, Ryan was pacing the living room, Victoria seated on the couch with her arms crossed in defiance. Chloe, as usual, was nowhere to be seen. The knock on the door was firm and resolute. I opened it, stepping aside as two officers entered, their presence commanding. Ryan froze mid-step, his face pale. Ryan Miller, the officer announced, pulling out a set of handcuffs. You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and emotional abuse. What? Ryan's voice cracked. This is a mistake. Olivia, tell them this isn't what you want. I met his desperate eyes with a calm he couldn't shake. It's exactly what I want. Victoria shot up from the couch, her face a storm of indignation. You can't do this. He's her husband. This is all just a misunderstanding. The second officer addressed her with a tone that silenced the room. Victoria Miller, you are also under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and coercion. This is ridiculous. Victoria screamed, resisting as they reached for her wrists. I was protecting my son. She's a vindictive woman who can't handle the truth. Save it for the judge, the officer replied coolly. Ryan, now in cuffs, turned to me one last time. Olivia, please. Don't do this. We can fix this. No, Ryan, I interrupted. You broke it. And now, you'll face the consequences. As the officers led them out, I could hear the whispers and gasps from the neighbors gathered outside. Ryan's head hung low, his bravado shattered, while Victoria continued to hurl accusations, her pride refusing to let her accept the reality. Just as I thought it was over, the door swung open, and Chloe appeared, her face pale as a ghost. She froze at the sight of Ryan and Victoria in handcuffs, her eyes darting to me in panic. Chloe, I said, stepping forward, my voice steady. Did you think you'd get away with it? Olivia, I didn't know, she stammered, her hands trembling. I had no idea Ryan was married. He told me you were. Don't lie, I snapped, holding up a printed copy of her social media post from their Hawaiian vacation. You knew. And you enjoyed every moment of it. Her face crumbled, tears streaming down her cheeks, as she clasped her hands together in desperation. Please, Olivia. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was just, spare me the excuses, I said, cutting her off. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. The lawsuit is already in motion. The officer nearest to her stepped forward. We suggest you cooperate. Trying to evade accountability won't help your case. Chloe's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her as she realized there was no escape. As the police cars pulled away, the murmurs outside grew louder, and I stepped onto the porch, meeting the curious gazes of my neighbors. For the first time, I didn't feel embarrassed or ashamed. I felt strong. Jenna joined me, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You did it, Olivia. You took back your life. I nodded, my resolve firm. This is just the beginning. Sitting on the porch of my new lakeside home, I took in the serene view before me, the shimmering water reflecting the soft hues of the sunset, the gentle rustling of trees in the cool breeze. This was nothing like the house I had left behind, with its hollow walls filled with deceit and betrayal. This place was mine, a symbol of my fresh start. The first step toward reclaiming my life had been letting go of the house that once symbolized my marriage. It hadn't been easy. I had agonized over it, but Jenna had gently reminded me, that place isn't your home anymore, Olivia. It's just a memory, and not a good one. She was right. Selling the house had felt like shedding a heavy coat of grief, and with the proceeds, I bought this lakeside retreat. It wasn't as grand as the house Ryan and I had shared, but it was warm, inviting, and full of potential. It was my sanctuary. Therapy became my anchor during those early days. Dr. Harper, a compassionate yet no-nonsense therapist, guided me through the labyrinth of emotions I had buried for so long. You've been through something unimaginable, Olivia, she'd said in one of our first sessions. But healing isn't just about moving past the pain, it's about rediscovering yourself through it. There were moments when the anger and sadness felt insurmountable. Nights when I'd wake up from nightmares of the accident, or of Ryan's cold, calculating betrayal. But Dr. Harper taught me to face those feelings instead of running from them. I learned to channel my rage into constructive outlets, writing, painting, even jogging along the lake's edge. Each activity became a small victory, a step toward reclaiming my sense of self. Jenna was my rock through it all. She would drop by with groceries, or insist on dragging me out for a hike. On particularly rough days, she'd sit with me in silence, a comforting presence that reminded me I wasn't alone. You're stronger than you think, she'd say, her faith in me unwavering. The legal battle raged on in the background, but Jenna handled it with precision and care, sparing me the brunt of its chaos. Updates came sporadically. Ryan's desperate attempts to negotiate, Victoria's dramatic claims of innocence, Chloe's futile efforts to distance herself from the scandal. I let Jenna handle it all, trusting that justice would prevail. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding. I returned to my roots as an entrepreneur, launching a small consultancy from the comfort of my lakeside home. The work was fulfilling, a reminder of the drive and passion that had once defined me. Slowly, I began to see myself not as a victim of betrayal, but as a survivor, capable of thriving despite it. The turning point came one crisp autumn morning. I had been painting by the lake, a hobby I'd rediscovered during my recovery, when I realized I wasn't thinking about Ryan or Victoria or the lawsuit. My mind was blissfully clear, my heart light. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was simply present, at peace with myself and the life I was rebuilding. Later that evening, Jenna joined me for dinner on the porch. As we sipped wine and watched the stars blink into existence, she turned to me with a smile. You know, Olivia, you've come a long way. You should be proud. I looked out at the tranquil lake, its surface shimmering under the moonlight, and nodded. I said, my voice steady. For the first time in a long time, I really am. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the trial reached its pivotal moment. I sat in the front row, my heart steady, my mind focused. The evidence was undeniable, the testimonies had been clear, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking, something even darker than the betrayal I had already uncovered. Ryan's defense team had been desperate, grasping at straws to discredit me. They tried to paint me as unstable, as someone who had overreacted, but the facts didn't lie. Every piece of evidence, every text, every photograph told the story of his greed and deceit. But I knew this wasn't just about revenge. This was about holding him accountable for trying to destroy my life, and the lives of the people who had truly cared for me. The moment came during the cross-examination of Victoria. As she sat in the witness box, her face twisted in defiance, Jenna carefully presented a set of documents that had been uncovered during the investigation. It was a piece of evidence I had never expected, a life insurance policy taken out in my name, signed by both Victoria and Ryan, with a staggering payout. Victoria's eyes flickered nervously, but she quickly regained her composure. "What does that have to do with anything?" she scoffed, her voice feigning disinterest. Jenna didn't flinch. "It has everything to do with the truth, Victoria. This policy was taken out in Olivia's name, with the beneficiary listed as Ryan. And the date of the policy aligns with the time period when you were conspiring together to declare her legally dead." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. I could see Victoria's face drain of color, the walls closing in on her. Ryan, sitting across the room, shifted uncomfortably, his arrogance evaporating. He knew they had been caught, but it was Victoria who had always been the mastermind, the one pulling the strings. You're lying," Victoria stammered, her confidence unraveling. "That policy was a mistake. It was just to cover medical expenses." Jenna's voice was calm, unwavering. "This policy wasn't just for medical expenses. It was specifically for your plan to claim Olivia's life insurance. You and Ryan were going to declare her legally dead, pocket the money, and start fresh. That's the truth, isn't it?" Victoria's face twisted in fury, her carefully constructed persona crumbling. "You have no idea what it's like to have to deal with a daughter-in-law who won't let go. Ryan deserved a new life, one without a woman who was only dragging him down. He needed a fresh start, and I helped him see that." Her words were venomous, but they only served to further sink her into the pit she had created. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Victoria's frantic breathing. Ryan, too, seemed stunned. His eyes darted nervously between his mother and the jury, the weight of their actions finally sinking in. Jenna's next words sealed their fate. The plan wasn't just to get rid of Olivia's wealth, it was to get rid of her altogether. "You both tried to make her disappear, and if not for her resilience and the hard work of the police, this would have succeeded." The judge, his expression grim, finally spoke. "The evidence presented today leaves no room for doubt. Ryan and Victoria Miller, your actions were not only deceitful, they were criminal. You manipulated, betrayed, and attempted to destroy a life for your own personal gain." The decision was swift. Both defendants are hereby sentenced to prison for fraud, conspiracy, emotional abuse, and attempted murder. I could hear the gasps of the spectators in the courtroom as the sentence was handed down. I didn't feel relief or triumph in that moment, but something else, something deeper. I had reclaimed my life, but it would never be the same. As Ryan and Victoria were escorted out of the courtroom, their heads hanging in shame, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. They had finally paid for their betrayal. But there was something more I had gained in this process, something I hadn't anticipated. I had discovered a strength I never knew I had, and I knew that no matter what, I would never allow anyone to strip that away from me again. The trial was over, but the rest of my life was just beginning. And this time, I was the one writing the story. The first light of dawn stretched across the lake, painting the water in hues of pink and gold. I stood on the edge of the dock, the cool morning breeze brushing against my skin, the quiet hum of nature filling the air. It was a new day, a fresh start, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of the past lifting. The betrayal, the pain, the anger, they no longer had a hold on me. I had been through a storm. But now, I was standing in the calm after it, stronger, more at peace than I had ever been. The journey hadn't been easy. It had been filled with heartache, moments of doubt, and an overwhelming sense of loss. I had lost my marriage, my trust in people I had once loved, and the life I thought I was building. But through it all, I had found something even more valuable, myself. The legal battle was behind me. Ryan and Victoria had been sentenced, their schemes unraveled in a way that no longer mattered to me. I didn't need to keep dwelling on what they had done. What mattered now was what I was going to do next. I had decided to take the lessons I had learned and use them to help others. Through the support of Jenna, and the advice I had received in therapy, I had started a foundation aimed at mentoring women who had faced betrayal and abuse, those who had been lied to, manipulated, and discarded, just like I had been. I poured my energy into these women, offering them not just my story, but my strength. We met in small groups, offering support, sharing experiences, and empowering one another. There was a bond among us that I had never known before, a sisterhood built on healing, understanding, and the unwavering belief that no one's past should define their future. And as I stood there, by the lake, watching the sun break free from the horizon, I realized that my pain had transformed into something far greater. It was no longer just a scar from betrayal. It had become the foundation for something meaningful. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs, and smiled. The journey had been long and painful, but it had led me to this moment. A moment where I was not defined by what had happened to me, but by what I had chosen to become. The world felt wide open in front of me, full of endless possibilities. I had turned the darkest chapter of my life into the start of something beautiful. With one last look at the sun as it rose higher, I whispered to myself, "This is my new beginning." And for the first time, I truly believed it. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments section. Support us by subscribing to this channel. Like this video and share with others. Don't miss our next upload. See you soon.